I was planning for 45 minutes, but I'll try to squeeze it into half an hour. So first of all, metrics, mischief, and all that, that title of my talk is generated by ChatGPT. So, and then the description of my talk is also generated by ChatGPT. After I finish my talk, you decide whether the title or the description is right or wrong. So it's up to you. Disclaimers, this talk has nothing to do with my current employer. It's just a point of view that I have developed over the years, and I'll talk about what I have done in my career so far. But most of these learnings are actually come from people like you in conferences, and I do have some mentors. And one of the mentors, John Willis, I think he's in the audience, so he'll probably be loving it. I do not know which metrics work yet, but I do know the ones that do not work. And I think I do know something that may work. So that's kind of the set of the disclaimer. About myself, I go by Topo. Currently, I'm Vice President of Architecture, one of the architectural domain. And my domain is DevOps and open source at Fidelity Investment. In the past, I had done my PhD in semiconductor physics, did some research on nanomaterials. And then I joined IT. I had all the hats that could possibly be taken up by an IT person. I carried pager. I supported production instances. I logged into production instances and blew up things. And if I have noticed, every time I blew up things or messed things up, I got promoted. So if you have a dashboard, hey, Topo messed up things and Topo got promoted, you will see a direct correlation. But do not use that as a matrix. Do not try that at work. It may not work. So a few of the things that I'm proud of in my DevOps journey, one is Hygia DevOps dashboard that I created in 2014, 2015 timeframe and open source that. And then I co-authored this reference architecture called DevOps Automated Governance Reference Architecture. John Willis is also a co-author, and there are a few more people in there. And this resulted into this book called Investment Unlimited, a novel about DevOps security, audit compliance, and thriving in the digital age. And again, John Willis has been a co-author and a mentor for this book too. And I think we'll be giving out this signed copy of this book later sometime today outside of this hall. So see if you have a line, if you see a line, that probably is the John Willis signing book line. Now, every DevOps talk has to start with this because we talk about what is DevOps. And this is still true. It has many interpretations depending upon who you're talking to and at what time of the day you're talking to and at which year you're talking to. So we're not going to go to what is DevOps. Instead, we are going to talk about why is DevOps. And we all know the goal of DevOps is delivering high-quality software faster. This is one I had back in the days, but then I like this one better. Better value, sooner, safer, happier, from my friend John Smart. Now, we do know every enterprise is different. Every enterprise in the size, in the sector, in the culture, in their business model is different, and hence, not one size fits all. And I always say this, we need to build our own DevOps. Because the things that Google do cannot be replicated in your environment, most probably. Otherwise, you would be Google, or Google would be you, whatever. The things that work for Spotify may not work in your environment. Capital One has gone all into clouds. Doesn't mean that every financial institution can go all into cloud. It's all context-based, so be aware of that. Now, if we need to build our own DevOps, how is it that we can all stick to one set of metrics to measure our performance all across the board? So that's kind of the premise. Now, there are wide ranges of metrics measurements. They all measure different aspects of DevOps and agile processes, such as DORA, Accelerate, and I'm going to cover this in a bit of details today. Flow framework, I'm not going to cover this today. Burn down, velocity charts, you all know that. Developer productivity metrics, I'm just going to mention that I get puzzled by these metrics every time I look at it because I'm not sure whether you are measuring efficiency or productivity. They are two different things. Given a time, how much can I produce versus given what I need to produce, how fast I can produce. So, and I was in meetings with some folks last month, and they were talking about developer productivity. My basic question was, have we gotten a list of things that we expect our developers to produce? If yes, then there is a meaningful way to measure productivity. If no, let's not even talk about that. Then we have SRE metrics, and God help if you are doing this, DevOps maturity models. I'm not a big fan of maturity models in general, but I have seen many maturity models, and I'm not sure what they do or what they achieve. With this, the question is, do I then not measure anything? I think that's not a question here. Measuring nothing is not good, but the question is, what should we measure? Now, going back to all these measurement techniques and frameworks and things and dashboards, I came back to my research days and started asking myself some fundamental questions. What, why, who, when, how, and whom? So the first thing is, what's the context? Are we measuring technical ability? Are we measuring business value produced by the team? Are we measuring skill? Are we measuring individual? Who is it? Or what is it that we are trying to measure here? That's number one. Number two is, why are we measuring? Because somebody told us that we should measure this? Or are we trying to improve something? Or are we trying to protect something from not happening via these measurements? The next is, who are we measuring? Individual, team, a product team, a business unit, a whole enterprise, whole sector? Because many of these measurement techniques do not even specify who you are measuring. And God help us if you are trying to use these metrics as a performance indicator at the end of the year. When should we measure? Is it the right time? Are there any preconditions? If you look at a human being after they are born and develop through the years and interacting with different folks, and then they mature, the same thing happens with any application. They are formed, they get matured, they get developed, nourished over the years. At some point, they are in the maintenance mode, and then at some point, they die. Now, if you have the same set of metrics over the years of an application life cycle, you would be wrong, because we do not use the same set of measurements for a human being. I actually go, like every day, I go to gym. Not every day, some day, most of the days. But I do not measure the things that I used to measure when I was a little kid. I probably do not measure my height because I know there's nothing I can do about it. And at the same time, when a baby is born, I don't count the number of tooth that the baby has, because I know I have not seen any toothless grown-up people unless they're too old. So that's the timing question. The next is, how should we measure? Is there a standard technique? Some of the things I'll talk about in terms of, in Dora metrics and all that. I'll come to that a little deeper. How should we measure certain things? And then, who is it for? Is it for the developers? Is it for the senior leaders? Is it for the tech lead? Because there are certain things that we measure today and show it up on a dashboard. Developers already know about them. And the senior leaders, even if they look at it, they probably can figure out what they mean. Or the third thing is, they look at it and they don't know who to call or how to fix the things, or does it need to be fixed at all. Now, there are other things that we need to be careful about, whether we are looking for an indicator or a measurement. I'll give you an example. I go to a furniture store to buy a dining table, right? I have two options. I go in there and I say, give me a 4x8 dining table, or tell them, hey, I need a dining table for 6 people. Which is better? I think for the salesperson, it will be much better if they know that I'm looking for a dining table for 6 people, because 4x8, who knows what that means? In other cases, the converse might be true. So that's one thing we need to be careful about. And then this is what I observed a lot of times, what I call observer effect. It's basically you disturb the system that you are trying to measure just by the basic nature of your measurement, or just the fact that you are measuring. There's a converse of these two. A lot of times, if you tell that, hey, I'm measuring, just like my kids, hey, I'm watching on you, the kids do certain things in a good way versus a bad way. So there are both the sides of the same thing. However, I have seen more impact on the team, on the product, on the system, just because we are trying to measure something and decipher something out of that measurement. I want to actually have agile learning on the measurement. I want to be able to say that as a whatever, I want to measure whatever so that I can whatever. I think that paints a good picture as to, number one, who this measurement is for, who is asking for it, why are you measuring, and what exactly you are trying to measure. And as I go back to build your own DevOps, I think this thing will vary based on how you have implemented DevOps in your organization, based on the organization's need, maturity, sector, organization's age, organization's culture, and everything else around that. Let's talk about DORA matrix. And I want to apply what, why, who, when, and how on the DORA matrix. So before I go in there, let me tell you that Accelerated DORA, or the Accelerated book, and the DORA matrix coming out of that is one of the best books in DevOps, period. It has 250 pages full of data, science, reference, recipes, etc. It covers all aspects of DevOps: culture, leadership, technology, management, practice, and so on and so forth. It has identified 24 capabilities listed with explanation, case studies that can actually help you drive improvement. But when it comes to DORA matrix, we just focus on 4 keys, 1 page, or at least 1 table on page 17. I think it's still page 17. And the last thing is that I wanted to mention that I was the first customer of this research. I, as in my old workplace, Capital One, where I actually got involved with this whole research right from the get-go before it even became DORA. Jays and Nicole, we brought them to Capital One to actually do a beta testing of this survey. And we had a lot of influence in the whole survey. So I kind of know how these things work and where did this thing come from. So the first thing DORA matrix has is deployment frequency. I think it is very much undefined. My first question is, what is a deployment? Because you can ask different people in different organizations, and they'll describe deployment in a different way. In some cases, it's the big thick client that they're deploying, that's a deployment. In some cases, the whole 3 stacks of a 3-stack architecture they're deploying is a deployment. In some cases, even a ALB switch can be a deployment. Deployment of what? Is it a component? Is it an API? Is it a deployment of a database? Or deployment of a full application? And as soon as I hear deployment of a full application, I ask the next question, what is an application? So the problem is that unless we know how to actually define deployment or what is it that we are trying to deploy, we cannot count them, because I know for sure various different enterprises count their deployment in a different way. So if you count your deployment in one way, and if you try to compare with their deployment counts on another enterprise, you'll be actually comparing apples and oranges. Don't try to match them, they won't match. And don't try to copy them. And if you do not know how to count them, how can we actually have a status called you are elite, you are high performer, and you need to improve? We cannot have that. And who are we measuring? Is it, as I said, since we cannot define what an application is, we cannot define what deployment means, who are we measuring? Is it one product? Is it one product team? Is it one business unit? Is it the whole enterprise? Because I see AWS deploys X many number of times in a day. That's whole of AWS. I don't know what part of AWS deploys so many times, maybe all together. And I don't even know the things that they're deploying today were made when? 1 month ago, 1 hour ago, 1 week ago. That leads to the next thing is lead time. I think it's very much incomplete because we all know it's very hard to measure lead time when you think about when the story was created, or even left of that, when did the business actually come up with that idea, to the time when it is actually deployed to production and released to the customer. So since we cannot do that, Dora says the lead time is commit to deployment. My next question is commit to what branch? Is it the feature branch? Is it the release branch? Is it not? Unless you define commit to what branch, it becomes meaningless, because if we say, okay, let's figure out what the lead time is when you commit to the release branch to the time it actually hits the production, then all we are measuring is the pipeline execution time. Is it something that we need to measure in the big scheme of things? Probably yes, probably no, but that's the question to ask. And then it has a negative impact on CI practice. And I'll give you an example. If you say that, hey, I'm going to measure lead time, I'm going to try to optimize it or minimize it, and I'm going to measure from commit to the release branch to commit to deployment to production, then guess what the developers will do? And they do, I have seen that. What they do is they hold back merging or raising the pull request to the release branch, essentially keeping all the commits to the feature branch or in some other development branch. And until they're absolutely sure through all the testing and all that in that branch, then only they create the PR. But that's not CI. CI means I actually merge all my comments every day as frequently as possible to my main branch from where it can go to production. So that's what I was saying, observer effect. Just because somebody said I'm going to measure the lead time and try to minimize it for you, I'm going to work around and make it look good, but I'm not really good. In the contrary, I'm actually breaking some basic CI principle here. Change failure rate. It is a good measure, no question about that, and I think I like it. But it can be confusing because change failure rate, is it a failure if my blue deployment fails? Probably not, because I didn't impact the customer. It's like, Dad didn't see it, I didn't do it, right? So can be hard to pinpoint to a dynamic and complex system, right? So if you are deploying multiple times a day or multiple days a week, at some point, you will figure out that, hey, there's a problem, and you don't know which one caused it. It's a complex system, and you have all these different layers and playing all together. It could be as well network, which may not be deleted. So pinpointing is very hard. Real-life DORA metrics. I have seen one of these dashboards, and by looking at these, it's very hard to read. I took a screen cap, sorry about that. But if I look at the numbers, there's no way I know what's going on here, who is better than who, or what should I need to do. Or if I look at the boxes, if you see, the boxes are for teams. So that's not what we need to measure, right? And a team in a large enterprise may have many applications. Some are old, some are in maintenance mode, some are actually growing, being born. So for averaging all that out actually does bad things than good. But I think something may work, and I have been sharing that privately with my mentors and other friends, and they all like it. See if you like it. Here's the hypothesis. If there's only one thing that could accurately reflect an organization's technical abilities, is this: production access. So the idea is, I measure production access. How many times people actually get into production box and do something, whether it's fixing, whether it's reading the log file, whether it's deploying anything new, doesn't matter. My basic principle is nobody should have production access, period. And guess what? Your auditor will love you if you say that, because they don't want, even cyber people, they don't want anybody going into production boxes. And that's the only reason that they have to have all these different complex access model on production boxes, what dev can do, what ops can do, what somebody else can do. All I say is, okay, here's the thing. Nobody has access to production boxes, period. And if you need access, granted, there are times when you need access, you need to go through break glass process, meaning that you register for an access or request an access, and when you break glass, go into the production system, you need to have an incident. There's no other reason why should you have an incident, or maybe a change request, right? But at that time, you are actually being monitored as to what you are doing in the production boxes. So here's my hypothesis, that if you have zero production access, you actually ensure all the good DevOps technical abilities. Number one, production changes only happening via automated pipelines. And then Patching is via automated pipeline. Infrastructure changes are happening through infrastructure pipeline. That means we have everything as source code. And that also means that since nobody is actually logging into production boxes, all the logs are streaming out. That means you have good set of observability practices. And even incidents are fixed via running pipelines, right? So if you all agree that this is all I need for a good DevOps maturity model or whatever you call that, good DevOps practice, then it all leads to nobody has access to production boxes. Now, how do I measure that? Let's call it production access date. By default, no one has production access 0, which basically means ideal situation is 0 date. And then say, each persistent production access costs 25 points. You are on the negative. Each break glass or temporary read access costs 1 point. Each break glass temporary write access costs you 5 points. Set yourself a budget, and then every feature development cycle, look at it and say, okay, are we at 0? I'm 100% sure nobody will be at 0, but how negative are we? And then ask questions. Why did you need production access? Well, I needed to deploy something. Why didn't you have a pipeline? Well, my pipeline didn't work. Why didn't you fix the pipeline? Well, I could fix the pipeline, but my automated test coverage doesn't look good. Okay, then we need to write more automated tests. So all these things will automatically come out if you put this constraint. I don't want anybody to have access to production boxes. And also say, my auditors like that, and actually partner with the auditors maybe, and sell them these ideas. They will love you, and that can be a stick for the development teams. Hey, my auditor says nobody should have access to production boxes. Here you go. And then, of course, you know that, as I said, every application has a life cycle, right? So when the application is in mature or a maintained state or nothing major is changing, you need to make sure that you actually have a flow in place. So maybe you can have 2 additional things along with that to balance that out so that it doesn't happen that, hey, nobody has access to production, nothing is changing, nothing is breaking, there's no customer, nobody cares about this application, and hence we don't need production. No, you need to have actually a flow of things flowing through the pipeline into the production boxes, such as it could be a vulnerability or open source library update, or some Jira or GitHub issues, or security findings, or audit findings, anything. It's basically keeping the whole system vibrant. And then total downtime beyond budget. I think this is the classic MTTR, mean time to recovery. So whatever you use that or any other SRE matrix, that's good enough. I think what I'm saying is that with the production access and these 2 supporting things, you should be able to paint a good picture of your technical abilities. And of course, we know to get to 0 production access, it's just not technical abilities. It's about culture. It's partnering with security, audit, compliance. It's partnering with every team. And it's also partnering with your product team to make that happen. So it kind of touches a bit of culture, too. Now, if you want to start with something right away to make things better, count the number of hours spent in meetings instead of having DORA metrics or some other metrics, or number of stand-ups that are greater than 15 minutes. I call those sit-downs. Right? If it is more than 15 minutes, let's have a sit down and not stand ups. How many teams must be involved in one feature release of one product? And you know what I'm talking about here, right? I'm not going to spill the beans here, but typically in a large enterprise, releasing one feature of one product involves multiple teams. And that's a good measure to tell you how independent your product team is. I think there's a new indicator, too. How long did it take to fix the Log4 shell in production? We can have all good DORA metrics on a dashboard, and we should be happy, or we are happy. However, if it took a long time to fix Log4 shell in production, nothing matters anymore. And the reason I'm saying that is because we did a study, our group, in Jin Kim's IT Revolution, we had actually had a group and did some study to see how Log4Shell response patterns vary industry by industry and with organizations of different sizes. And this is what we found. Enterprises with best Log4Shell response, they have good SCA, or the software composition analysis tool, integrated with all code repositories, kind of DevSecOps or security shift left. They had complete SBOM of all repositories. Software bill of materials stands for SBOM. Full automated CI/CD pipeline, because if you remember, there were 3 versions of Log4j, 2.14, 2.15, 2.16, and landed on 2.17, the first one. So all the people who actually fixed Log4Shell in production the right way, they had to do it at least 2 or 3 cycles of this. Mature release engineering and change management process, because without that, you could not send stuff out to production, whether it's one feature change or even a Log4Shell library update change. And they also had good engineering culture and collaboration. So that's my talk. I think I squeezed it in, and I'm open for questions. Any question, anyone? Yes?
Yes, so a lot of this you're talking about, like at the last slide, talked a lot about SLOs, SLIs, and SLAs. So how do you get, what advice do you have for organizations who struggle with getting compliance and security groups to kind of lead this effort so that you can start to build your SLOs, which ultimately turn into your SLIs and SLAs, right? Because a big part of that is around compliance and security.
That itself is a standalone talk. So the question is, how do you actually work with, I'm trying to paraphrase that, let me know if I'm doing it right. How do you collaborate with your security, compliance, and audit teams to make sure that all these practices are in place? In my past, and I'm still doing it, to be honest, I'm actually making them the product owner of the thing that they're looking for, all the compliance requirements, the standards, and all that. Built on that, those will be embedded into the DevOps platform that people are going to use to do or manage their software delivery lifecycle. So if you must have noticed that any large enterprises, especially if they're regulated, they actually, most of the people that I've seen are quote unquote scared of cyber and compliance people. So anything that you can anything that comes from them have a stick kind of effect that you can actually embed into the quote unquote DevOps platform to make that happen. The idea is that don't ask developers to do things, make it so that they cannot avoid those things. And that's the only way to do that in a better way, and the way to do that is actually embedding those into the platform that we are. One example is software composition analysis embedded into your GitHub or Git repositories, right? Now, if that is a part of your platform, Git platform, then anybody has source code in there will get that feature no matter what they do. They don't need to do anything extra. It's embedded into the platform. And I can give you all the other things that should be part of platform. Please contact me right after this, and I can talk about more. Anything else? Okay, so like any conference, I think this is the start. The only thing, appeal to you is that if you agree or disagree, either way, please have start the discussion so that we can meet the goal of the conference, which is making our life easier as a whole community. So thank you very much, and I thank the organizers for having this opportunity for me. Thank you.